All right, welcome back to the third and hopefully final video on this particular Strat's Rewiring Odyssey. The previous video I'd expected to be one video, but when I was halfway through, I realized that these two pots here were crap, so they've been replaced. And as I'll show from a little snippet of the previous video, this guitar, when it came in, was getting really dark when you rolled the volume back, and it was very noisy in all 5 positions, especially position 2 with the without using any of the humbuckers, and position 2 had way too much quack. It was way too thin. So here's where the guitar was at before. Number 1, this guitar is not fully shielded, and even with these noiseless pickups, there's some hum and buzz. And then the number 2 position, you don't have any hum rejection at all, and that can be real problematic for him on stages. All that sounds pretty good. But when you get to the number 2, aside from the noise, it's really scooped and hollow and sounds very 80s. And here's where the guitar is at now. I don't have the screws in the pick guard yet. I was making sure I was happy with it first. I am, and I'll be putting them back after this. But sometimes when I do things that may come up a little bit, I'll be watching that. So here's the self noise of the guitar. Loudest on the humbucker, oddly. Again, this guitar is not fully shielded. I just did the full plate over the top, which does help. Even with these humbucking DiMarzio fake single coils, the wires coming from them are not shielded themselves. So before, they were subject to noise here and here all along this path until they got under that really thin yucky plate that was down here, just a little bit of aluminum foil. Now it's got some nice solid aluminum, pretty much all in this area. Anywhere the wires go is shielded from the top. When this body gets replaced, it'll get fully shielded. Anyway, here's the sound now that there is no big self noise. So the new number 2 position has got lots and lots of that chime you're looking for, and it's got that scoop. Just not that exaggerated sound. Let me check the tuning real quick. Sorry about that. New strings. Takes a while to settle in, especially with the bridge, the trim. Now, some guitars surprise you, and some manufacturers' specs aren't always the best manufacturer's specs. So DiMarzio said that for their Area 61s, they showed 250K volume and tone. And I had this wired up that way for a little bit. I found that it actually sounds best 500K volume and 250K tone. That works really well. Sounds the most natural. We'll turn the low end of the amp up a little bit. This Weber doesn't have a ton of lows, but you'll hear this guitar through other cabs later in some other videos. The other thing that surprised me about this guitar was on my Strat, which has got the Suhr Thornbucker and Suhr V60 LPs. The number 2 combination, which sounded most like the vintage Strat, was the Thornbucker in parallel mode, in parallel with the middle pickup. So I tried that on this, and it sounded terrible. It was just honky and boxy and not a lot of fun, real plasticky. So what I've got this wired up as is what Mike Landau does. So this is the full humbucker in parallel with the middle pickup. And by playing around with the heights of them, you get this sound. Which sounds very much like a real Strat. Let me prove that. So that gives us a much more authentic sounding number 2 position. It doesn't have that Richard Marx production needs chorus and delay, really scooped out brittle sound from the 80s, late 80s. And it doesn't have all the noise that it had before either, which is nice. Now if I take my hands off the strings, there's a slight increase in noise. It's not as good as it is on the fully shielded guitars, but it's infinitely better than how it was. And as I roll the volume back now, it doesn't lose highs. Now, finding the right treble bleed cap in this guitar, I went with the treble bleed circuit rather than the 50s because the DiMarzios were just dumping all their highs, even with the 50s wiring. You find compromises because these are very different pickups. So these pickups, the DiMarzio 61s, do get a little bit thin at the lowest volume settings with this bright cap. But I did not find it objectionable. The humbucker sounds really natural throughout. It's pretty much its entire volume range until you get down to like 3. But that's really not going to be much of a problem. And if you do, sorry, it's hard to do that with the pickguard not screwed down. Works just fine. So this was a way to make the guitar sound natural if you roll down a little bit, which can be useful if you have the amp turned up. So I'm really pleased with how this came out. We have 5 very usable sounds. These 4 sound like a Strat, and then you got that humbucker. The noise is gone, or at least greatly, greatly diminished, pending full shielding. And the treble response is much more useful. If I really had more time, and I've got so many apps to get to and so many emails to get to, I could probably do a different treble bleed for this position than these 2 positions. You know, sometimes good enough is all that you need, and this is certainly more than good enough. So we'll be hearing this guitar when the owner comes to pick it up, along with his brand new amp. So Stay tuned for the real playing test.